God, this is a fucking mess. I slammed my laptop shut, the cold steel feeling like a reflection of my life. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and what you're about to hear isn't the story of how I saved a company. It's the story of how I secretly bought it, fired its CEO, and took control, all while pretending to play nice. But don't worry, there's much more to it. I sat across from Mark Davidson, staring at him with a neutral expression, though inside I was anything but calm. His mahogany desk gleamed under the fluorescent lights, casting sharp shadows across the room. The air felt thick with tension, but I maintained my composure. After all, I had been here before. I had learned long ago that in this world, control was an illusion, and maintaining your cool was the only power you could truly hold on to. Mark's words pierced through the quiet hum of the office. We're restructuring the department, and unfortunately, your position won't exist after next month. It was as though time slowed down in that moment, each syllable lingering between us like an invisible wall. I nodded, my mind scrambling to process the cold finality in his tone. This is it, I thought. It's finally happening. I looked at Mark, his smirk barely concealed behind the veneer of professionalism he tried to maintain. His eyes twinkled with an almost sinister satisfaction. Like a man savoring the power of a moment he knew would bring him some twisted sense of victory. He was used to being in control, a feeling he thought he could have over me too. The irony of it all made me want to laugh, but I didn't. I simply responded, my voice calm and collected. I see. So this is how it ends, I thought. After all these years, after everything we've built, this is how it ends. His smirk widened. But before you go, he said, leaning back in his leather chair, you'll need to train your replacement. Jennifer starts tomorrow. I expect you to show her everything about running our marketing division. I suppressed the urge to roll my eyes. Jennifer? Another one of Mark's recruits, no doubt. A shiny new tool to further his misguided vision for the company. But I knew better than to show any hint of disdain. After all, my role now was to simply teach her. Teach her everything about the division I had worked tirelessly to build from the ground up. I kept my voice steady, the calm facade never wavering. Of course, I'll make sure Jennifer learns everything she needs to know. Mark nodded, pleased with my docile response. Good. I knew you'd be professional about this. Too many people get emotional when they're let go. His words echoed in my mind. Emotional? I wanted to snap back, to remind him that emotion had driven every decision I had made here, every sacrifice, every hour of hard work. But I didn't. I just stood up, nodded, and walked out. As I made my way back to my office, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief mixed with anxiety. It was as though a door had just closed behind me, but there was another, much bigger door opening in front of me. What now? I asked myself. What do I do next? I sat at my desk, surrounded by piles of paperwork, reports, and plans. Everything felt familiar. But there was a shift now, a subtle change in the air. Things were no longer the same. Mark had no idea, of course. No idea about what had been happening behind the scenes for months. For years, in fact. No idea that everything was about to change, completely and irrevocably. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Maya. He still doesn't suspect anything, right? I smiled to myself, texting back, not a clue. It was funny, how much had happened without Mark ever knowing. And now the time had come to set things right. But even as I made my way through the motions of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling of what was to come. How will he react when he finds out the truth? The truth about me, about Memph's ventures, about everything. But for now, I couldn't afford to dwell on it. I had work to do, and as I organized the files on my desk, I felt a strange mix of emotions: fear, excitement, even relief. This wasn't just about keeping a company running anymore. It was about something much bigger, something I had to do, something I couldn't turn back from. The next morning, I arrived early. Jennifer was already waiting in the lobby, her sharp suit making her look every bit the corporate climber. She looked at me with a cool appraisal, and I immediately knew she wasn't here to learn. She was here to take over. I led her to my office, trying to maintain a professional demeanor, though I couldn't help but feel a tug of something deeper. Why am I doing this? I thought. Why am I wasting my time with someone like her? But I pushed the thought aside. Welcome to Davidson Tech, I said warmly, though the words tasted bitter in my mouth. I'll be showing you the ropes over the next few weeks. She barely concealed her condescension. "That's very kind of you. Mark has told me all about the changes he's planning to implement." Of course he has, I thought. He's always a step ahead in his own mind. "Why don't we start with our current marketing strategy?" I suggested, trying to mask my irritation. "I'm sure you'll find it enlightening." 2 hours later, I was certain of what I had already suspected. Jennifer was a poor fit for this role. Every suggestion she made was a reflection of everything wrong with her former company. "Aggressive acquisition," she had said dismissively, suggesting it was more effective than building lasting client relationships. She clearly didn't understand the value of what we had built here. As the meeting dragged on, I felt a sense of unease growing within me. What am I really doing here? Why am I pretending to train someone who was only going to dismantle everything I had worked for? I could feel the tension rising in my chest as Jennifer droned on, her words almost too loud in the quiet of my office. I kept my gaze steady, though inside I was starting to unravel. How did it come to this? I wondered, the question echoing in my mind. How did we go from building something meaningful to this, where every decision is about profit margins and shortcuts? Jennifer's attitude only reinforced the sharp contrast between what Davidson Tech had once stood for and the direction it was heading now. "These retention strategies are outdated," she said, her voice tinged with arrogance as she flicked through my presentation. "In my experience, aggressive acquisition is far more effective than maintaining existing relationships." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to remain calm. She doesn't get it, I thought. She doesn't understand what Robert Davidson built here. But I couldn't say that. Not yet. I had to play my part. I had to be professional. I nodded, making a mental note of her suggestions. They didn't matter, not really. But the cold realization settled in. Mark's idea of fixing things was going to ruin everything. His so-called power move, hiring Jennifer from our biggest competitor, was just another piece of the puzzle he was too blind to see. He thought he was outsmarting me, but he was only hastening the company's demise. The meeting dragged on, Jennifer talking about acquisitions, expansion, and aggressive tactics that would tear apart the very fabric of what had made us unique. Is this what she was hired for? I thought bitterly. To tear down everything we've built? At 10 a.m. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket, pulling me out of the spiral of frustration. It was a text from James. "Papers filed. Board members notified. Meeting set for 11. I smiled to myself, a cold sense of satisfaction washing over me. This was the moment everything would change. "Jennifer," I said, standing up from my desk, the sound of my chair scraping the floor cutting through the tension. "I'm afraid we'll have to cut this morning's training short. There's an emergency board meeting I need to attend." Her expression faltered, a brief moment of confusion crossing her face. "A board meeting? But Mark didn't mention anything about—" "No, I don't suppose he did," I replied, cutting her off. There was no need to explain further. She was nothing more than a pawn in Mark's game, and I wasn't about to waste another minute on her. "I'll be back shortly. I'll catch up with you later." I left her in my office, still processing the news as I made my way down the hallway. Every step felt like a weight had been lifted. I was about to take control, to turn the tide, but it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. The stakes were higher now. What was coming next would require every ounce of strategy I had. As I entered the conference room, I saw Mark already pacing, phone pressed to his ear, his face flushed with frustration. "What do you mean, emergency board meeting?" He snapped into the phone. "I'm the CEO, I have to approve these things." I didn't wait for him to finish his call. I simply walked in and sat at the head of the table, my back straight, my demeanor calm despite the storm raging inside. Mark looked up, his eyes narrowing as he saw me. He hung up the phone abruptly, but I could already tell he wasn't happy to see me. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "This meeting is for executives only." I met his gaze without flinching. "I know," I said quietly, "that's why I'm here." Before he could respond, the other board members began to file in. Familiar faces. Faces that had been sidelined, pushed aside by Mark's increasingly erratic behavior. They recognized me, and I saw the flicker of surprise in their eyes as they took their seats. James entered last, carrying a thick folder of documents, and gave me a subtle nod before sitting down. It was time. I had been preparing for this moment for months, and now everything was about to fall into place. Mark's face turned from red to white as the realization started to set in. He opened his mouth, about to say something, but I cut him off before he could form any more empty threats. "I did," I said, my voice steady, my heart pounding, but not from fear. No, this wasn't fear. This was determination. 3 months ago, Mex Ventures acquired controlling interest in Davidson Tech Solutions. As of this morning, that acquisition is complete and fully documented with the SEC. The room fell silent as Mark's shock registered. His face twisted into disbelief, and he sputtered, "Mex Ventures? But that's my company! I built this!" "No," I interrupted, standing up slowly, my gaze never leaving his. "It was your father's company, and it's time for a change." I could see the anger building within him, his fists clenched at his sides, but I had no intention of backing down now. I wasn't here to fight him. I was here to fix everything he had broken. To restore what had once been great. "Actually, Mark," I continued, my voice unwavering, "I can afford to buy this company, and I did. And now, I'm here to discuss the future of Davidson Tech Solutions." For a moment there was silence. Mark looked around, his eyes scanning the room, hoping someone would come to his defense, but the board members were all silent, their gazes fixed on me. It was clear they knew the truth, even if Mark had failed to see it until now. I smiled inwardly. This was just the beginning. The real work was still ahead. But for the first time in years, I felt in control. I pulled out Robert Davidson's old photo, placing it on the table. "Your father," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper, "built this company on principles of innovation, integrity, and respect for every employee. It's time to return to those values." The weight of the moment was almost too much to bear, but I knew what I had to do, and nothing, not even Mark's threats or his bluster, was going to stop me now. The room was thick with silence after my words. The tension in the air felt suffocating, like the calm before a storm. I could see the gears turning in Mark's mind, his face contorting with rage, disbelief, and perhaps a little fear. It was impossible for him to wrap his mind around what was happening. He was used to power being his birthright. He was used to making decisions without ever needing to look over his shoulder. But now, the foundation he had so arrogantly built was crumbling, and he was powerless to stop it. I watched him, the fury twisting his features, his hands balled into fists. "You can't do this," he sputtered, his voice rising. "I'm a Davidson. This is my company, my father's company. You." He pointed at me as if the very accusation of taking his place could undo everything I had worked for. "You've gone too far. This is illegal. You can't just steal my company." The board members, once silent, now began murmuring among themselves. They had been complicit in Mark's reign of mismanagement for far too long, but as the evidence in front of them mounted, they could no longer deny the truth. It was clear in their expressions that they had seen enough. For the first time in years, the room seemed to pulse with something that felt like hope. I leaned forward, taking a moment to steady myself before continuing. "Actually, Mark, I didn't steal your company. I bought it, legally. Every transaction, every stock purchase, every document, everything is fully documented. I followed the rules, just as your father would have." I took a deep breath, letting the weight of my words sink in. This wasn't just about securing a business deal. This was about restoring dignity, integrity, and the vision that Robert Davidson had instilled in the company so many years ago. I motioned to James, who had been quietly observing the exchange, to begin distributing the paperwork. The rustle of documents was the only sound in the room. One by one, each board member began to flip through the files, their brows furrowing in disbelief, then in understanding. They saw the proof: charts detailing stock purchases, SEC filings, transaction histories. Nothing was hidden, nothing was fabricated. As the last document was handed out, I turned to face Mark once more. "MKIS Ventures now owns 51% of the shares in Davidson Tech Solutions. I'm officially in control, and this board meeting is here to vote on new leadership." I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This wasn't just a corporate takeover. It was the culmination of years of careful planning. It was about ensuring that the company Robert had built would survive, even if it meant tearing down the empire Mark had tried to create. Mark opened his mouth to argue, but the words seemed to falter on his lips. He was lost for a moment, caught between the angry storm within him and the reality that he was no longer in charge. The room, once filled with his loyal supporters, now felt different. The board members who had once bowed to his will were now looking at him with doubt in their eyes. "Is this even legal?" he muttered, his voice trembling slightly. This can't be happening." James cleared his throat, his tone calm but firm. "I assure you, Mr. Davidson, everything is above board. Every step has been taken according to the law." He paused, allowing the words to sink in. "Would you like to see the full documentation of how Ms. Mitchell acquired the shares?" Mark opened his mouth to protest, but the weight of his own defeat was sinking in. The legal papers, the shareholder votes, the quiet but unshakable truth, they were all there. He had no leg to stand on, and deep down I could tell he knew it. I could feel the eyes of the board members on me. They weren't just observing a business transaction anymore, they were watching a shift in the very fabric of the company. For the past 3 years, they had seen the company's decline under Mark's leadership, and now they were seeing something else, a chance to restore what had been lost. They had been waiting for this moment, and now they had to decide where their loyalty lay. I stood up, my voice unwavering as I addressed the board directly. For the past 3 years, we've watched this company lose market share, lose talented employees, and, most importantly, lose its identity. Under Mark's leadership, Davidson Tech has become a shadow of what it once was. A company founded on integrity, innovation, and respect for its employees has been turned into a place where favoritism, short-term profits, and personal egos dominate. But that ends now. I could feel the weight of the words as they left my mouth. The truth was there, undeniable, and I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. This wasn't just about profits. It wasn't about who had the bigger ego or the sharper suit. This was about restoring the company to what it had been, what it could still be. "The numbers speak for themselves," I continued, pulling up the charts on the screen behind me. "In the past 3 years, our profit margins have dropped 40%. We've lost 12 major clients, and our employee turnover rate is at an all-time high. But it's not just about the numbers. It's about who we are as a company. Robert Davidson built this company to be more than just another tech firm. He wanted us to make a difference, not just in the market, but in people's lives. It's time to return to those values." I paused, looking around the room. The board members were no longer just listening. They were absorbing the weight of what I was saying. Many of them had worked under Robert's leadership. They had seen the company rise, they had seen it thrive, and they had seen it fall. Now, they had a chance to bring it back to life. But Mark wasn't ready to give up just yet. His face twisted with rage, his voice rising in desperation. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, his hands shaking. "You can't just throw me out. I'm a Davidson. This is my company." I raised a hand to silence him, my voice calm but firm. "No, Mark, this was your father's company, and he knew that leadership isn't inherited, it's earned." The room fell into a tense silence, and then a voice from the board spoke up. Janet Chen, a board member I knew had been quietly observing the decline, stood up. "I second the motion," she said, her voice steady. "It's time for a change." The vote was swift, decisive. It didn't take long for Mark to realize that he had lost. Within 15 minutes, he was no longer CEO of Davidson Tech Solutions. The board had spoken, and there was no turning back now. Security was called to escort Mark out of the building, his face purple with fury as he shouted threats about lawsuits and revenge. But the damage had been done. The company was mine now, and it was time to rebuild. As the board members filed out, some of them stayed behind to speak to me. Janet came over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "That couldn't have been easy," she said quietly. "But it was necessary. You did the right thing." I nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settling on my shoulders. The hard part was just beginning. But I was ready. The weeks that followed the board meeting were a whirlwind. The immediate relief of knowing the company was mine, truly mine, not Mark's or anyone else's, quickly gave way to the heavy burden of responsibility. It wasn't just about the legal paperwork anymore, it was about fixing what had been broken. I had inherited a company teetering on the brink, and I had no illusions about how much work lay ahead. One of the first tasks was dealing with Jennifer. She had been hired by Mark to replace me, which in hindsight seemed almost laughable. After all, how could someone with no understanding of the company's culture or history take my place. But I couldn't just let her slip away unnoticed. She had to be addressed, and the sooner the better. Maya, my best friend and now head of HR, was in the loop from the start. She had been one of the few who knew what I was planning, and though I could see the pride in her eyes as I stepped into the role of CEO, she was always quick to remind me of the challenges ahead. "What's the plan for Jennifer?" she asked me one afternoon, looking at me over the top of her glasses as she flipped through a personnel file. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "I think it's time we had a conversation with her." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Are you going to offer her a chance to stay?" I thought about it for a moment. Jennifer had potential, sure, but her mindset, shaped by a different company culture, would never align with the values I was trying to bring back to Davidson Tech. "No, I think she'll understand once we explain things." I could feel the weight of the decision even as I said the words. Letting someone go, even under these circumstances, was never easy. The next morning, Jennifer was in my office, looking more self-assured than ever, her suit pressed perfectly, and her makeup flawless. She sat down across from me with an air of quiet confidence, clearly unaware of the storm brewing. "I'm sure you've heard by now," I started, my voice calm but firm. "Mark is no longer with the company, and as you know, I've taken over as CEO." Jennifer nodded, but I could tell she wasn't fully processing it. She was still caught up in the idea of being a part of the new regime that Mark had tried to set in motion. She wasn't prepared for the truth of what was happening under my leadership. "I've reviewed your file and your background," I continued, "and I think you'll agree that your previous experience doesn't align with the direction we're going in. Our culture here at Davidson Tech is about fostering long-term relationships, creativity, and trust. That's not something you'll find in the aggressive acquisition strategies you're used to." I watched her carefully as I spoke. Her initial reaction was defensive, her posture stiffening. "I thought Mark had big plans for the company," she replied, her voice tinged with confusion and a hint of disbelief. I shook my head. "Mark had plans, yes, but they were short-sighted. This company needs more than just profits. It needs integrity, sustainability, and a return to innovation. We're building something that matters, not just chasing after fleeting trends. I hope you understand that." Jennifer sat back in her chair, the weight of my words sinking in. There was a flicker of understanding in her eyes, followed by resignation. She knew she wasn't the right fit for what we were building. "I see," she said quietly, and I could tell there was more than just acceptance in her tone. There was a subtle shift in the way she saw me now, perhaps even a grudging respect. "Thank you for understanding," I replied. "I'm sure you'll find another opportunity that better suits your strengths." She stood, gathering her things, and for a moment our eyes met. There was no animosity between us, just the quiet acknowledgement of what had been and what wasn't meant to be. As Jennifer left my office, I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. It was never easy letting someone go, but it was necessary. We couldn't afford to have anyone in the company who didn't align with the values we were striving to restore. The next task at hand was more difficult, though: rebuilding the company's internal culture. Over the years, under Mark's reign, Davidson Tech had gone from a place of innovation and collaboration to a toxic environment of favoritism and profit-driven decisions. It was time to clean house, but carefully. I needed to bring back the employees who had been sidelined, the ones who had been passed over or dismissed by Mark for political reasons. Maya and I spent long nights sifting through personnel files, making lists of people who had potential but had been overlooked. "Look at this," Maya said one evening, pulling up a file on her computer. "Thomas Channon, engineering. He's been passed over for promotion 3 times despite multiple patents and excellent performance reviews. He's exactly the kind of person we need in a leadership position." I leaned over to look at the file, nodding. "Let's set up a meeting with him. We need people like him to step up." It was a delicate process, finding the right people, the ones who still believed in what Davidson Tech had stood for, and those who would help rebuild what had been lost. The work wasn't glamorous, and it didn't come with instant results, but it was necessary. Slowly but surely, we began to reshape the company, not just in terms of who we hired, but in the way we treated each other, the way we worked together, and the way we thought about success. But not everything was as easy as hiring the right people. There were days when the weight of everything would feel too much to bear. On those days, I would sit at my desk, look at the picture of Robert Davidson. His smiling face still hung proudly on my wall, and wonder if I was truly doing the right thing. Was I being too hard on myself? Was the pressure of living up to his legacy too much? Maya would always remind me, though, that it wasn't just about the numbers. It wasn't about how quickly we could rebuild, but about building something that would last. "You're doing it, Sarah," she would say. "This company is going to be better for it." And slowly, over the course of weeks, I began to see it too. The energy in the office started to shift. Employees were collaborating again, sharing ideas, asking questions. There was life in the company again. It wasn't just about getting through the workday anymore. It was about creating something bigger than ourselves, something that mattered. The change wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't fast, but it was happening, and it was only just beginning. The days blurred into weeks, and the weight of the task I had undertaken pressed down on me with an intensity I hadn't anticipated. Every decision seemed crucial, every move scrutinized, not just by the board or the employees, but by myself. The doubts that had crept in before were still there, lurking in the background. Was I doing the right thing? Was I pushing too hard? Could I really bring this company back from the brink? The first real test came a few weeks after Jennifer's departure. It wasn't just about internal restructuring anymore. Word had begun to spread throughout the industry that Davidson Tech was under new leadership, and with that came scrutiny. People were watching. Mark's influence, although diminished, still had a ripple effect. Rumors began to circulate. Some of them were harmless, like the usual whispers that every company faces when there's a leadership change. But others were more insidious. There were whispers about instability, that I wasn't ready, that the company was in turmoil. It wasn't just rumors from former employees who had left under Mark's tenure. Industry analysts, people who had once hailed Davidson Tech as a leader in innovation, were starting to question our ability to recover. "Will she survive?" they asked in articles. "Can a company like this bounce back after such a chaotic shift in leadership?" I could feel the pressure mounting with each passing day. There were meetings with investors, calls with clients, and numerous internal discussions with Maya about employee morale and the culture we were trying to rebuild. But the constant, nagging thought in the back of my mind was the same. What if I fail? I had always known this was going to be a long game. The road to recovery was going to be slow, painstakingly slow, and every decision mattered. But the reality of it was harder to bear than I had expected. I wasn't just trying to save Davidson Tech, I was trying to restore its very soul. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal meeting with a major investor who had raised concerns about our market share stability, I found myself in my office, staring at the photo of Robert Davidson. His face seemed almost to mock me at that moment, his smile frozen in time as if daring me to live up to the ideals he had built the company on. I touched the frame lightly, my fingers tracing the edges of the glass. "I will make you proud, Robert. I have to. I can't let this company go under. I won't let Mark's legacy be the last one remembered." Maya entered without knocking, her face a mix of determination and concern. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. She already knew. "I spoke to the marketing team," she said, her voice low. "They're worried. People are starting to talk again. About the changes. Some of them are skeptical. They're afraid we'll lose more clients, that we're just putting a fresh coat of paint on the same old problems." I sighed and sat back in my chair. "I know, I can feel it too. It's like the walls are closing in. Every decision feels like a test, and I can't afford to make a mistake." Maya sat down across from me, her gaze softening. "You're not alone in this, Sarah. You've got a whole team of people who want to see you succeed. It's easy to forget that sometimes, but they're behind you. We're behind you." I looked up at her, taking in her words. "I know, but it's hard to ignore the noise. Every day it feels like there's another hurdle, another thing I have to fix. And I don't know if we're making enough progress. People are watching, waiting for us to fail." She nodded. "The noise will always be there, but you've already made the hard decisions. You've proven that you have the strength to face the worst of it. All we need now is patience. Let the results speak for themselves. Her words were a balm for my frayed nerves, but they didn't quiet the storm of uncertainty inside me. We were building something new. Yes, but that didn't mean the road ahead would be smooth. There would always be the risk of failure, the possibility that the foundation we were trying to rebuild was too damaged to support the weight of our ambitions. But I had no choice. I couldn't back down. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. The first signs of progress didn't come in grand gestures, but in the small victories, details that when combined began to shift the tide. The innovation lab we'd revived was finally showing results. A team of engineers had developed a new product prototype that was drawing positive attention from a handful of clients. We hadn't won back any major clients yet, but we were getting close. The feedback from our employees was improving too. Slowly, the toxic atmosphere that had once dominated the halls of Davidson Tech was being replaced with a new energy, one that felt more collaborative, more open. Still, the pressure didn't relent. We were living day by day, trying to make it through the next crisis, the next decision. And then, just as I had begun to think we might be turning a corner, a new challenge presented itself. The competitors who had once been far behind us in the market were beginning to catch up. One of them, a company we had considered an afterthought just a year ago, had released a new product that was getting rave reviews. It was fast, efficient, and the press loved it. We had to respond, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that we were being pushed into a race we weren't fully prepared for. I sat in the conference room with my leadership team, staring at the numbers, the projections, and the new product launch schedules. We couldn't afford to sit back and let this competitor pull ahead of us. We needed to move quickly, decisively. But how? How could we compete when the odds were stacked against us? "It's time," I said, breaking the silence that had fallen over the room. "We're not just going to fight for market share. We're going to innovate. It's the only way we'll make it through this. We need to double down on what we've been working on, the product that will change the game for us. We can't let anyone get ahead." Maya nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. "You're right. We have the talent. We have the ideas. Now we need to execute." I looked around the table at the faces of my team. They were ready. They were as tired as I was, but they were ready to fight for this company. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a while: hope. The path ahead was still uncertain, but I wasn't walking it alone anymore. And for that, I was grateful. This company, our company, was more than just a business. It was a testament to what we could achieve when we stayed true to our values, even when the odds were against us. It was time to fight back. And this time, we were going to win. The days that followed our decision to double down on innovation were nothing short of intense. We had no time to waste. The competition was gaining momentum, and our own survival depended on whether we could deliver something that would put us back on top. The pressure was palpable, hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. The leadership team and I gathered daily to monitor our progress, and slowly, despite the overwhelming workload, we started to see small signs of breakthrough. Our engineers, who had once been relegated to the background under Mark's leadership, were now working tirelessly on the new product that we believed would be our game changer. I could see the spark of creativity and determination in their eyes, and it gave me the strength to keep pushing forward. But even as the internal atmosphere began to shift, I couldn't ignore the whispers outside the company. The market was watching, waiting for us to falter. Every decision, every new initiative was scrutinized by analysts, by competitors, and by former employees who had left after Mark's reign. Some of them, especially those who had been loyal to Robert Davidson, were waiting to see if we could really restore the company's former glory. But I had no time for doubts now. I had made the decision to step up, to do what was necessary to save Davidson Tech. I couldn't afford to look back. I couldn't afford to second-guess myself. This was my moment. This was our moment. Maya was my rock through it all. There were days when I felt like I was drowning in the weight of the decisions I had to make. We had to secure new clients, maintain the morale of our employees, and deal with the pressures of the market, all while trying to reinvent our product. But every time I doubted myself, Maya was there, reminding me that we had come this far, and we weren't going to stop now. "I've been looking at the numbers," Maya said one evening as we sat together in my office, the glow of the desk lamp casting a soft light around us. "Employee satisfaction scores are up by 30%, and we've had 3 former employees reach out about coming back. People are starting to believe in us again." I nodded, though the smile I gave her was weary. "I know. But it still feels like we're so far from where we need to be. The industry is moving so fast, every day feels like a race." Maya leaned back in her chair, her gaze unwavering. "That's because it is. But you're not doing this alone. We've got a team of people who are working harder than ever, and you're leading them. You've already made it through the hardest part. Now it's time to show everyone what we're really capable of." Her words, as always, gave me strength. But the reality of our situation was never far from my mind. I wasn't just managing a company. I was managing its identity, its future. And while the team was incredible, the final decision on whether we succeeded or failed rested on my shoulders. The pressure intensified as we entered the final stages of our product development. The clock was ticking, and we had to move fast. The competitor who had released their new product was now being hailed as the next big thing in the industry. They had the attention of the press, the analysts, and a growing number of customers. We couldn't afford to let them pull ahead of us. One morning, I sat down with the head of product development, Chris, to review the final prototype. "How's the progress?" I asked, my voice steady despite the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Chris looked up from the documents in front of him, his face pale but determined. "We're on track. The final testing phase is almost done. We've fixed the bugs we found last week, and the feedback from our internal testers has been positive. We're confident this product is going to be a game changer." I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "This is it then. This is our shot. We can't afford to miss this opportunity. Once we launch, it needs to be perfect." "I understand," Chris said, his voice firm. "We're not going to rush it, but we're going to make sure everything is ready." That afternoon, I sat in the conference room with Maya and the rest of the leadership team as we went over the final details of the product launch. The excitement in the room was palpable, but so was the fear. This was a huge risk. If we succeeded, it would signal to the world that Davidson Tech was back. If we failed, well, we couldn't afford to fail. We agreed on a timeline for the launch. It was ambitious, but it was the only option we had. We would target our biggest clients first, offering them early access to the product. If we could secure their commitment, it would give us the leverage we needed to create a buzz around the launch. As the days drew closer, I found myself alternating between bouts of optimism and moments of paralyzing fear. I would stand in front of the mirror in my office, taking a deep breath and reminding myself that this was the right path. Every step I had taken so far had led me to this point. I couldn't afford to back down now. The morning of the launch, I stood at the front of the conference room facing a sea of eager employees. Their eyes were filled with anticipation, hope, and yes, a bit of anxiety too. The product was ready, the launch event was set, and it was time to show the world what Davidson Tech was capable of. I cleared my throat and smiled, the weight of the moment settling in. "Today is a big day for all of us," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Today, we prove to the world that we're not just a company that's been resting on its past. We're a company that's built for the future. We've worked hard, and now it's time to make our mark." The room erupted in applause, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to feel a rush of pride. This wasn't just a product launch. This was a statement. A declaration that Davidson Tech was back and ready to fight. As we prepared for the final presentation to our clients and partners, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd come. A year ago, I had been on the verge of losing everything. Now we were about to show the world that we were ready to lead again. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be setbacks along the way, but in that moment, I felt a quiet sense of pride in what we had accomplished so far. It was time to take the next step. And this time there was no turning back. The launch event was everything we had hoped for, and more. We had prepared for months, and now, standing before our largest clients and industry partners, the weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. But as the presentation unfolded, the tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by excitement and intrigue. The new product, a seamless, innovative solution to a long-standing industry problem, was met with a mixture of awe and admiration. It was exactly what we needed to prove that Davidson Tech was still a force to be reckoned with. I stood at the front, watching the reactions from our clients, trying to gauge their responses, their interest. Every nod, every word of praise, sent a surge of confidence through me. It wasn't just the product that was winning them over. It was the promise of a fresh start. A company that had been stagnating under Mark's leadership was now showing that it could innovate again, that it could lead, that it could make a real difference. After the event, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We had done it. The first hurdle was cleared. Our clients were impressed, and more importantly, they were eager to move forward with us. The early adoption rates were through the roof, and we were starting to see a significant spike in media coverage. The buzz around the product was palpable, and the press had finally begun to take notice of the turnaround at Davidson Tech. But as gratifying as the success of the launch was, it was only the beginning. The next challenge was just as daunting, proving that the success wasn't a fluke. Our competitors would be watching, waiting for us to slip up. They would be looking for any weakness, any crack in our armor, and I knew we couldn't afford to give them one. I called an emergency meeting with the leadership team the next morning to discuss our next steps. The room was full of energy, but there was an undercurrent of caution. We had succeeded, but we knew better than to get complacent. "We've made it this far, but this is where the real work begins," I said, addressing the team as they gathered around the conference table. "The launch was a success, but now we have to deliver. Our clients are counting on us to continue innovating and pushing boundaries. We can't let up." Maya nodded, her expression serious. "What's our next move? We've proven that we can develop cutting-edge technology, but we need to expand our reach, build on the momentum we've created. We can't just be a one-hit wonder. We need to secure more partnerships," I said, feeling the weight of the next phase settle in. "We need to engage with industry leaders, build strategic alliances that will help us gain market share, but we also need to show our existing clients that we are committed to long-term success. This isn't just about the product, it's about building relationships." Chris, the head of product development, spoke up. "Our product has already started making waves in the industry, but we need to keep iterating. We can't let our competitors catch up. We need to stay ahead of the curve." I agreed, but part of me was still uneasy. The pressure to perform was relentless, and with each new success came new expectations. It was as though we had lifted ourselves from the brink of disaster, only to face an entirely new set of challenges. Over the next few months, we worked tirelessly, refining the product based on client feedback and industry trends. We expanded our marketing efforts, pushing the message that Davidson Tech wasn't just another tech company. It was a company that cared about people, about creating products that would make a real difference. We held webinars, wrote thought leadership pieces, and continued to build relationships with our clients. Slowly but surely, we began to expand our client base. However, despite the outward success, the weight of being the sole leader of Davidson Tech was starting to feel heavier. The constant scrutiny, the unrelenting need to be perfect. It was exhausting. There were days when I found myself questioning whether I was truly the right person for this job. I had come so far, but the fear of failure still loomed. The doubt was always there, lurking in the back of my mind, whispering that it could all fall apart at any moment. One evening, after an especially long day of meetings and calls, I found myself sitting alone in my office. The building was quiet, the usual hum of activity muted as employees filtered out for the day. I stared at the photo of Robert Davidson on my desk, his steady gaze seeming to follow me. He trusted me to lead this company, I thought, feeling a lump form in my throat. I can't let him down. Just as I was about to turn off the light and head home, Maya knocked softly at the door. "You okay?" she asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. I smiled, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. "Just tired," I replied, running a hand through my hair. "It's been a long day." She sat down across from me, her gaze gentle but knowing. "You've been carrying a lot on your shoulders, Sarah. It's okay to feel the weight, but you're not doing this alone." I looked at her, grateful for the reminder. I know, I'm just trying to make sure we don't slip up. The competition is fierce and the expectations are high. Sometimes it feels like everything is riding on my shoulders. Maya leaned forward, her voice firm. You've already proven yourself. This company is in the best hands it's ever been in. You didn't just save Davidson Tech, you're making it better. The team believes in you. I believe in you. I sat in silence for a moment, taking in her words. Then, with a soft laugh, I stood up. Thanks to Maya. I needed to hear that. She smiled warmly. Anytime. Over the next few months, the momentum we had built continued to grow. Our product was now being adopted by some of the biggest names in the industry, and we were starting to gain back the market share we had lost during Mark's mismanagement. Our clients were happy, our employees were thriving, and the company's future seemed brighter than it had in years. But there was still so much to be done. The road ahead was long, and the competition wasn't going to stop. However, with each passing day, I felt more confident in my ability to lead, to push this company to even greater heights. The legacy of Robert Davidson wasn't just something I had inherited. It was something I was building upon, something I was shaping with every decision, every action. We had been through the storm. Now it was time to rebuild the company from the inside out. And this time, it would be even stronger. A year had passed since the fateful day when Mark had been ousted, and Davidson Tech Solutions was a different company. The transformation was tangible, visible in the energy that now filled the offices, in the new products that had been released, and in the client base we were steadily rebuilding. But the most profound change wasn't something you could measure on a spreadsheet or see in a meeting room. It was in the culture, in the very fabric of the company itself. I stood at the front of the auditorium, looking out at the sea of faces. Employees filled the seats, their eyes expectant. Some had been with the company under Robert's leadership, and many had joined since I took over. But all of them were part of something bigger than just a business. They were part of a team, a community, that was committed to something that mattered, creating not just successful products, but an impact. Today was our annual company meeting. And as I looked around, I saw a reflection of how far we had come. There was an energy in the room that hadn't been there before. People weren't just showing up for a paycheck. They were showing up because they believed in what we were doing, because they believed in the vision that had been almost lost but had now been revived. I took a deep breath and began to speak. Good morning, everyone, I said, my voice steady, though I couldn't deny the surge of emotion that threatened to break through. When Robert Davidson founded this company, he had a vision, not just of creating successful products, but of building something that would last. A company where integrity, innovation, and respect for every employee were the cornerstones of everything we did. For a while, we lost sight of that vision. But we're back, and today, we're stronger than ever. The applause that followed was genuine, filled with the sound of people who were truly invested in the company's future. And it was then that I realized just how much we had accomplished, not just in terms of business success, but in how we had restored the soul of the company that Robert had built so many years ago. The numbers were impressive, no doubt. We had increased profits by 45% compared to the previous year. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. But it wasn't just about the statistics, it was about the culture we had built in those 12 months. We had reinstated mentorship programs, revived the innovation lab, and created an environment where creativity and collaboration were encouraged. People were excited to come to work, to share ideas, and to push the boundaries of what we could achieve together. But the most important thing we had done was to restore the company's identity. We weren't just another tech firm chasing profits. We were a company that believed in something deeper, something that mattered. We were building a legacy that Robert Davidson had dreamed of, and that we would carry forward for generations to come. As I spoke about the progress we had made and the exciting projects on the horizon, I couldn't help but glance at the photo of Robert that hung on the wall behind me. His image had been a constant presence throughout this journey, a reminder of the values that had once defined Davidson Tech, and a guide for the direction we were heading in now. He would be proud of what we've accomplished, I thought, my eyes lingering on the photo for a moment longer than I had intended. We've done it, Robert. We've brought this company back to life. After the meeting, I found myself in my office, reflecting on everything that had happened. The hard work, the sleepless nights, the doubts and fears, it had all led to this moment. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to relax, to let go of the constant pressure that had weighed on me for so long. But as I sat there, a soft knock on the door pulled me out of my reverie. Maya stepped inside, a smile on her face. "You did it," she said, walking over and sitting in the chair across from me. "I've never seen the office like this before. People are excited, Sarah. They believe in what we're doing. You've really brought them back." I smiled, grateful for her support. "We've done it. Together. But I couldn't have done this without you, Maya. You've been with me every step of the way." She shook her head. "No. This is your victory. You took the risks. You made the tough calls, and now look at us. We're not just surviving, we're thriving." I nodded, but even as the words left my lips, I knew that the journey was far from over. We had come a long way, but there was still so much left to do. Our competitors were still out there, and the market was ever-changing. But I was no longer afraid. I knew what this company stood for now. I knew where we were headed. That evening, as I walked through the office one last time before heading home, I saw the familiar faces of the employees, some working late into the night, others gathering in groups to discuss new ideas. The office no longer felt like a place where people came to punch in and punch out. It was alive, buzzing with creativity, with excitement, with the possibility of what we could achieve together. And as I passed by Robert's photo one last time before leaving, I smiled to myself. We're going to make it. We're going to make this company everything it was meant to be. When I got home that night, I received an unexpected email. It was from Margaret, Robert's widow. I had expected it to be a message of congratulations or gratitude, but as I opened it, the words hit me harder than I anticipated. "Dear Sarah, I've been watching everything you've done with the company over the past year, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank you. Robert always said you were special, that you understood what Davidson Tech was really about. He was right. You've kept his dream alive and made it even better. Thank you for everything you've done for this company, for our family. With gratitude, Margaret." The words brought tears to my eyes. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about business. It wasn't just about profits or competition. It was about legacy, about honoring Robert's vision and making sure that it lived on, even after he was gone. It was about ensuring that Davidson Tech was more than just a company. It was a place where people could grow, innovate, and make a difference. And as I closed my laptop and sat back in my chair, I knew that I had made the right choice. I had taken the risks, made the sacrifices, and fought for what was right. And in the end, it was all worth it. Robert's legacy was alive and well, and now it was my legacy too.